in, Marcia? Yep, we're on. Okay, welcome everybody to Gardening 101. My name is Claire Laurenz. I grew up on a farm in the Midland area and I studied at Michigan State University. I went to school for agriculture education, food education, natural resources education, but since then I've been working in the youth world. So I've been working for the Chippewa Nature Center. I worked for a couple of youth development camps, leadership camps, and an earth school in California. So I'm really happy to be here. My energy level and expertise is really geared towards second and third graders, so I'm excited that you're here. Hopefully everybody has a clipboard with some colored pencils because eventually we'll be doing some coloring, and let's begin. There are many types of gardens. I'm guessing that we are here to learn about vegetable and fruit gardens, but some of the things to think about when you're deciding what type of garden you want to have is why are you starting a garden? Are you starting a garden for beauty, for food consumption, for your well-being? Are you going to consume these products, or are you going to use them as oils on your skin, or maybe infuse them or drink them as tea? And so some of those things will help you decide what you're growing and why you're growing them. How long will you be on a site? If you want to have an orchard, but you plan to move in 2 years, maybe hold off until the move and then plant an orchard. How much space do you have? Here in the Midland area, there's a lot of urban gardens, so maybe a container garden would be best for your property, or picking like an L-shaped plot for your garden on the side of your home or in the back of your home or something like that. It doesn't have to be like a big square plot in the middle of the backyard. You can get creative, especially if you have a smaller space. Terraced beds are also perfect for smaller spaces as well. Will you have help? Does your family plan to travel? Do you plan to be in the area for a long period of time? Are you feeding 10 people, but you're the only one that is really working hands-on in your space? Do you have kiddos that want to help out? And if you do have help, another question is, what are they interested in? And so if you're working with a partner, a husband, a group of children, what do they want to grow? What do they want to eat? What do they want to experience through working in the garden space? Which can really help, because if you start growing white pumpkins, but everybody wanted orange pumpkins instead, then there's a little bit of a gray area where you have to explain yourself. So how long, or are you looking for foods to store for an extended period of time? If you are really looking for food to eat in the winter, I would recommend potatoes, squash, apples can keep for a long period of time, cabbages can keep, carrots can keep, but if you want to eat vegetables, fresh vegetables in February, you probably shouldn't plant only tomatoes because they just won't last as long, unless you can them. But that's something to think about, how you're going to store your food and what you plan on eating. Do you plan on eating mainly soups, mainly salads, stir fries, things like that? I listed a whole bunch of gardens here. We've got tree gardens or permaculture, which is a really unique way to introduce a bunch of native plants and also encourage animals and other species of insects to come and inhabit your land as well. Bird gardens can be really beautiful. Fruits and vegetables, yeah. Butterfly gardens, water gardens, container gardens for a small space or indoors as well. Organic gardens and also rain gardens. All right, for those of you at home, I hope you have a piece of paper and a writing utensil. And if you don't, now's the time to get that out. For all of us here, I thank you for grabbing a clipboard in the back. And we're going to draw your yard. This is where you're going to manifest and use your creativity and really answer the question of why you want to have a garden, what do you want your garden to look like, what kinds of things you want to plant in your garden. I have colored pencils in the back if you want some colors that you weren't given. Yeah, we're going to draw your yard, and then once you have a good layout of the area of the yard that you're drawing, you can also draw your garden. We're looking for location, orientation of your garden, which direction you might want it to face, the size, and the layout. Now, none of this is right or wrong right now. This is just if you've never made a garden plan before, this is a great way to start. And for Gardening 101, I figured it was a good introduction activity. I'm going to play a song on the laptop, and while that song is playing, just think about some of your goals. Think about where the trees are in your space, where the shade is. If you want to grow lots of leafy greens, maybe don't put your garden in the middle of the hot sun. But if you want hot peppers, you can put your garden right where there's no shade. So I'm going to turn on the music. If you have any questions, let me know, but we're just drawing your yard and your garden. Anybody on the screen, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, and I think I'll be able to hear you. Okay, I can go check. I can check. I think what you have in your inbox is a link. And so take a look at your email inbox, look at the email, and then the link should bring you right to the presentation. And right now we're on slide 2.
Okay, so I won't disconnect myself if I switch the email up?
I don't think so, but we'll let you back in case that happens.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
I know that was not enough time to draw out your entire dream garden, but hopefully you included some trees, walkways in your space. If you drew your yard and forgot the walkway that you have to the back shed and you put your garden there, that probably wouldn't work out very well. And also your water sources and storage areas as well. So where might you be keeping your tools? Where might you be keeping your buckets? Things like that. Do you have an outdoor sink to wash vegetables? If not, that's fine, but those are all things to keep in mind while you're laying out your space. The next slide is going to be about picking your place and picking your spot for your plot. But the reason why I had us draw it and kind of bring it from imagination to the real world before explaining how to do it is because I wanted to give us an opportunity to just really see where we wanted to go with this project. Because having a garden is a commitment, and so if it feels forced, then a lot of things can go awry, especially when harvest season and workloads start picking up. So your picture that you drew hopefully brings you happiness and excitement, and let's talk about some of the real ways that we can bring our gardens to life. In picking a location, super important to pick a sunny spot, usually for the things that we plan on growing. So a south side of a house or building is better than the north side because the south side will get more sun. As the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, the south side of buildings and also forests, if you're next to a woods, is the better option for placing a garden. Also, orientation and shape. I talked a little bit about an L shape. If you have like a spot in a corner that you can actually like bring your garden around the corner. But orientation can be important because when you're on the south side of your home or wherever you are, you can plant the rows along the north and south axis to really bring in the most sun. And if you want to grow something that has a terrace, like grapes for example, put the grapes closest to the building that you're working with. So the grapes should be on the north side of your garden where the terrace will be. So, and peas as well. Peas, grapes, anything that would grow on a terrace would be on the north side of the garden. The garden itself is on the south side of the building, and the rows can go lengthwise north and south. Size is a good thing to consider when thinking about how many people are going to be helping out, how much time you have, and also how much food you can eat. And maybe it's not just you that you're feeding, maybe you're bringing your goods to a farmer's market or to a church, or maybe you're donating vegetables, but don't let the size deceive you and don't think that you have to have something big and spectacular because that can produce a lot of food, maybe on accident if you weren't prepared for that. And then also layout. Do you want the carrots next to the corn? Where do you imagine things going? There are also some right and wrongs when it comes to the layout of the garden, but we'll be talking about that in a second. Picking the spot for your plot. Usually it's good to have a space that has 6 hours of daylight in the summertime. Also air circulation. You wouldn't want to put a garden right in between a big garage and a big home and then with a forest on either side. Make sure it's kind of an open area where the plants can breathe. And also animals like birds and insects can also come and visit as well. If it's in a really closed, tight space and there's not a lot of air circulation, it can really put a damper on visiting the garden for like certain pollinators. Drainage. We're going to talk about soil in a second, in a slide or two, but it's important if you have one side of your yard or space that's really, really sandy or really, really like not a well mix. So maybe it's just clay or just sand. Try to pick a spot that's more of a balance. A loose and rich soil is the best. And you can tell the richness of a soil based on its color. So the darker a soil is, the more nutrients and the more rich it often is. Convenient access to tools and water, we mentioned that, and placement. We talked about the cardinal directions and how you want it on the south-facing side. And if the question comes up, do I want my plants to have more morning sun or afternoon sun? The answer is morning sun. Afternoon sun can be really, really scorching hot, especially in the summer months, which is hard to think about now because it's February and there's snow. But thank goodness it was 40 degrees today. It's getting warmer. But anyway, morning sun is a lot more gentle on your plants versus the hot afternoon sun, where it's also really, really dry as well. Soil.
I'm hearing you. I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying. You have to have the mask on?
I believe I do have to have my mask on in order to keep the people that are here in person safe.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, I'm having a little bit of difficulty, but I'll try.
Okay, somebody's coming over.
Having a hard time?
Is anybody else on Zoom having a hard time?
I can scoot back if she can take her mask off.
No one can have a mask. No one, the current state laws say that everyone inside,
It's when you turn your face right now, we could hear you, but when you turn your face to go towards the screen, we can't hear you.
Okay, so if I stand, echoing? All right, well, I'll try to stand here and read the slide and then talk back to the people and the screen as well. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
All right, I'll try to remember. All right. Soil is one of the most important pieces to your garden. It's where your vegetables are getting the food they need to feed you. And so this slide is titled Soil, 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 because it's very, very, very important. Improving drainage. When people think of soil, not only are we growing and feeding our plants, but we're also giving them water and hydrating them as well. And after a big rain, if you've ever noticed large puddles forming in your yard, try to avoid those places when you are planting your garden. To increase drainage, you can aerate your soil, and you can also add sand. There are multiple ways to add aeration to your soil, like digging it up or tilling it. You can also use a broad fork, which is a very big fork. It has tines on the bottom and two handles on the side, and you stick the broad fork in the ground, step on it to make it go down, and then you can move it back and forth. Broad forks can also be used for planting carrots. So if you want carrots and you need to add aeration to your soil, consider a broad fork. But when it comes to drainage, super important. And you can also add different things to your soils to increase drainage or to actually do the opposite and hold in some moisture. So if you have a really sandy plot, the water will not be held into your soil because sand is really good at draining. And so if you need to increase the moisture, you can actually get something called vermiculite, and I have some today. This is vermiculite. Vermiculite is really good at holding in moisture. The opposite of vermiculite is perlite. And so if you have the opposite problem and you need to shed water, consider adding perlite to your plot. So vermiculite is coarse and has lots of little pieces. Perlite is kind of pearly, and it's a lot softer, and it helps shed the water. You can also get a soil test. At the end of the presentation, I have some resources, and Michigan State University actually offers a soil test. Soil tests are great to do before planting and after planting. So before you plant, you can get a soil test, figure out what your soil needs, what it doesn't need a lot of, and then you can plan for the season ahead. And then in the fall, when you've harvested, you can do another soil test to see what came out of your soil and what needs to go back into your soil, and what you have enough of going into the winter months, and then again planting the next year. Aeration, we talked about using the broad fork, but you can also do a technique called double digging, where you dig a trench about a foot down. So this is a pretty labor-intensive physical activity that you would do in your garden, but you would be down on your hands and knees, or you could use a larger shovel as well. And you dig 1 foot down, and you dig a trench. And you take all that soil that you just took out of your trench, and you put it, you just like fold it over on the top of the garden bed. And then so you removed 1 foot. There's another foot of soil underneath, and you're going to take a fork or a spade, and you're going to just kind of fluff it up. Just add air. You're increasing the aeration and just kind of moving the soil around. And then, once that's done, you move back a couple inches, kind of like this staircase right here. You move back and you dig another trench. And you take the soil that you're taking out of that trench, and you put it in the first trench. So you're just moving it over. And then you dig underneath that trench, fluff it all up, and then when that's done, you move back again. And you continue this process of aerating and just mixing your soil, and it can prove very fruitful and bountiful in the end, even though it could take quite a long time. This process, if you decide to do it, please don't be in a rush, because it could take a little time, but in the end it could be really useful for your garden. And you can also increase your organic matter a number of ways. The two that I have listed on the screen are compost and also planting green manure. And so the top 12 inches really can be good, rich, organic soil to help your plants grow. You wouldn't want to go more than 12 inches because oftentimes the roots don't reach down that far, so really focus on that first 12 inches on top of your soil. Compost can be food scraps. We'll talk about it a little bit later as well. But green manure are plants that you plant on top of your garden and then you leave there. And so you plan on just folding them over or tilling them into your garden bed. So they actually add nutrients. You plant them, they grow, and then you just till them in and they add nutrients that has been taken out by growing other plants. Composting. There's a bunch of different ways that you can compost. Right now I'm composting with an ice cream bucket in my fridge. When I use food scraps, I save the desirable pieces for different broths, and then the undesirable pieces go in my ice cream bucket in the fridge. So it doesn't have to be fancy. That's number one. It doesn't have to be fancy at all. You can also use a giant aluminum rotating bin. That's on the more fancier upscale side. So you've got this giant rotating bin. When you have food scraps that are breaking down, they can add a lot of nutrients back in your soil. And it's important to keep those pieces of compost really moving so that they can decompose properly. If you just put them in a big pile and you're not really adding any water, or you're not forking it around and lifting it up at all, it can just get really, really hot and not decompose in the way that you intended. You can also bury a trash bin in the ground, all the way. So you've got a trash bin that's maybe waist high. You dig a waist high hole, you put the trash bin in. It's got holes on the bottom and on the side to kind of let the air come in and out. You've got a tube in the middle of the trash bin it doesn't fill with water. The tube can help take water back out. But instead of a big metal bin rotating in the air, you can just bury a bin. Or if you don't have a lot of animals in your area, you can also take some stakes and just do 4 stakes to make a corner, and then chicken wire around the outside, and you can just put your compost into that, and then fork it around and move it around every once in a while. Rotation. That's why we're using the forks. That's why we're rotating that big bin. If you have a bin, you can use lawn clippings, food scraps, dead leaves. A lot of people ask questions about manure. Yes, you can use manure, but it can get really, really hot, and so if it's not hot enough, then either wait to use manure, or you can use a little bit and then wait a year to use your compost, because you don't want to put anything in your garden that could cause illness to you or somebody else eating your food. Some things actually kill good bacteria on accident, like citrus rinds, treated wood, and black walnuts. And on the other side of that, some things actually attract critters. So putting a lot of dairy, meat, or oils into your compost can invite raccoons, possums, friendly neighborhood dogs, cats, things like that. All right. People on Zoom and Facebook Live, we will get you a calendar. But for those of us that are in person, let's take a look. This calendar is from the MSU Extension, and it's about smart gardening. And so gardening is kind of a full year commitment. So right when you're done gardening, you're cleaning up your garden for the year, it'll be time to start planning ahead. And so the MSU Extension actually laid out a garden plan or a garden calendar. And it talks about different activities that you should be considering to keep your garden healthy during each month of the year. So in January, for example, is a good time to buy seed catalogs and kind of plan your garden. If you haven't planned your garden yet, you can put a big check mark next to it, because a couple minutes ago, we actually began that process. In February is a good time to test seeds for germination. So if you have seeds that you've been storing, now is a good time in February to actually make sure that they're going to sprout and germinate. And you can also order seeds for the garden. In March is a good time to look at the materials and the tools that you have. Maybe send in that last soil sample to make sure that you're ready for the next year, the next season coming up ahead. In April, we're fertilizing. We can start planting some of the cool crops like onions, beets, lettuce, spinach, things that might survive some of that colder weather we face either in April and the beginning of spring. But these are also plants that you can plant at the end of fall. So if you're really trying to hold out and get some last things in at the end of fall, you can plant some of these cool crops as well. If you planted some seeds and you began germinating those seeds, you can start hardening them off in May, meaning that you take the seeds outside to get them used to the outdoor weather instead of your kitchen counter or wherever you've been holding them. So then they get used to being outside in the wind and the weather and maybe the rain. June, July, August, a lot of harvesting. September, a lot of harvesting. In June, we're doing a lot of weeding. We're monitoring everything regularly. In October, we're completing the harvest. November is a good time to get that second soil test in if that is something that you're interested in. And in December, yeehaw, you get to enjoy all the stored food that you have, either in cans or the freezer or whatnot. I also have, for those of you online, I will get you this link, but I also have an experience for you to view. There's a website that can be a very helpful resource. If you're deciding what to do and where to grow it and what to plant and when to start using your seeds, I have been using this website for a couple years now with different schools that I've been working at. It's a calendar. And so it asks you to find your zone, choose your plants, and then explore. So let's do the zip code for Midland. 48640. I guess I live in Midland as well. I could have just put mine. Okay. Let's see. So we are in planting zone 6. Let's choose some flowers. Impatiens, sunflowers, sweet peas. As you can see, there's a lot of things on this list. Fruits. Apples are delicious. Figs are delicious. Grapes are delicious. Anybody curious about any certain herbs? Yes?
Basil. Is it on? Oh,
Basil, number 1. And dill. Okay. Oh, and you asked me a question about
I did ask about that, yes.
All right, and for those of you in front, any vegetables that you're particularly curious about? All right, I'm going to do green beans and rhubarb. Let's see how this works. You can see that on the bottom, it's actually pulling together, well, you can't see very well because actually it's on a screen, and it's pretty zoomed out. But up here, there are the months of the year, and right here are icons. And so this light green icon stands for starting indoors. And so there's a month right here that corresponds with this, and it says starting indoors. So you would start sowing your impatiens indoors at whatever month it says to do that, based on your specific zip code and your specific zone. It does that for all of the things that we've selected. Green beans, lettuce. Some of these, like rhubarb, have really, really long growing seasons, and you can actually plant them and harvest them and sow them at a lot of different times of year. And so sometimes the calendar will repeat itself, and so you'll get a spring recommendation and then also another fall recommendation as well. But this website is Gilmour, Gilmour. Yeah. So, calendar, hopeful website. And then after you've found some things that you are excited to grow, or you want to grow, or you've dreamed of growing, it's also important to consider other things that you're growing next to or like in the same area of your garden. So, what to grow and how to decide. Some plants work together and some plants just don't. So I have 3 vegetables up on the screen. Beans are friends with beets, carrots, and cucumbers, but their foe is fennel, garlic, and onion. And so you can definitely plant all of these things in your garden, but not right next to each other or in the same bed. You could, but it's not recommended. A lot of this information is found online and in books. There are some books in the back at the end. You're free to take some if you'd like. But it's just good to know what types of vegetables are beneficial and also can actually hurt the other veggies that you're trying to grow. And this is because some of them might grow taller and actually block the sun. Some of them might be water hogs, while you might plant them next to a plant that really needs a lot of water. And they also have microbes in their roots and different chemicals that can actually affect each other depending on what kind of plants you're working with. And so some of them are friends, some of them are foes, and it's good to know. Seed starting. Right now is a good time to test the seeds that you plan to sow or grow. And there are 7 steps on the screen. So seed starting mix, that's a really nutrient dense mix of soil, and maybe vermiculite could be in there as well. Lots of organic matter, and it's also really good for moisture. I have some cocoa coir here. It's more on the expensive side. You could buy it at like PetSmart, but it's really deep in color, and that tells us that it is high in organic matter.
What did you say it was?
Cocoa coir, so it's C-O-C-O.
Yes, so
Yeah.
coconut.
It's the second word is C-O-I-R, which sent me for a loop, cocoa coir. Yes. So this is cocoa coir. It is high in organic matter because it's dark in color, which is a hint, but it can be used as part of the mix for seed starting. You just want a mix that isn't too dry and is high in nutrients so that the seeds are actually able to germinate or sprout and support themselves through their early growing stage. You can also use trays or containers with holes on the bottom. This tray is what you usually would see in a store or a greenhouse, but you don't have to be strapped to use trays just that you buy specifically for this purpose. You can use trays at home. If you have yogurt cups, you can poke holes in those. This is a strawberry container that was on its way to the recycling bin that I snagged for this presentation, but you can get creative. The reason why you want holes on the bottom is so that you can actually water your plants. Let's imagine that this is full of your soil mix. You can put it in a tray like this, and so after the watering process, the water will go through your tray, and it can actually sit at the bottom of this larger tray. This larger tray does not have holes on the bottom, and the seeds can actually, and the soil can actually soak the water in from this bottom tray. So they're not going to get overwatered unless you fill it all the way up. But after a healthy watering, some of the water will seep down, and then that will just be kind of in a pool for your seeds to use later. You're going to need the seeds if you're going to start seeds, and you also need tags. So let's talk about the process of how to actually start your seeds. You're going to get your seeds. You're going to get your mix. You've got your container with the holes. Maybe it's the strawberry container, maybe it's this one. You're going to fill your container with the mix. And then you're going to open your seed packet. You're going to look at the label on your seed packet and write the label on the tag so that you don't forget. And you're going to put the tag in the container that you're using. You're going to sprinkle the seeds on top. For most seeds, please follow the directions as advised on the seed container because some plants grow in different ways. You're going to sprinkle the seeds on top, and then you're going to put a very light layer of mixture back over the seeds so that they don't get too dry. You're going to water them as they're in this non-hole tray so that they can actually stay moist. And then you're also going to cover them. So if you've got an actual cover, you can use that. You can use a cover like this. This one wouldn't work exactly perfectly. You don't want to like snap it down and keep air out of the air out of the container, but you just want to cover it to keep the moisture in. You can also use a bread bag. So if you're going for strawberry containers and covers and things like that, you can use a bread bag to actually create that greenhouse moisture effect for your started seeds. Wait for them to germinate, which means that the seeds actually start growing and sprout above the soil. When they germinate, you can uncover them, so take off your bag or your lid. And then this should all happen in a warm place. Usually it's about 70 degrees, so it can be in a warm room in your house. And after the germination period and time passes, you can also start hardening them, which means taking that entire tray that you just planted and putting it outside for periods of time to get the plants used to being outside. And then it's ready to transplant. And you can transplant those seeds that you've been growing in the containers and actually move them to your garden bed where you planned it all out. I have some resources to go over with everybody. So again, there's the calendar that you can use. YouTube is a great resource. This is just a random person. I've watched some of his videos in the past, very informational. Joe Gardner TV. But YouTube is a really great way to access information, especially if you're looking for people in your area. Sometimes they have people in like certain zones. It's like how to plant tomatoes in zone 6, and you're like, hey, I'm in zone 6. And so that can be really helpful. And they show hands-on right at the access of your tablet or computer or whatever. Michigan State University has an extension office, and they're really passionate about helping people grow their own food and enabling people to really interact with the environment in positive ways. So the University Extension Office has an entire site and extension branch specifically for gardening. You can ask tons of questions, find resources. Sometimes there's gatherings or classes that are available. Some of them are free online, some of them you can sign up for. There's different courses that are available. I mentioned earlier, but MSU is also the location for soil testing. And so you can access this by just Googling MSU soil test, and it'll be like one of the first links. But if you're really interested in having a soil test done, you can collect soil from your garden, package it up, as they say, on this website, ship it to them, and then they will send you back the results and their recommendations. So really helpful, especially if you're doing a really large project where you're working and hoping to work with a farmer's market or something like that. It can be really important when you're growing a lot of food in a big space to be aware of the different soil types you have. I work at the Chippewa Nature Center, so here's the Chippewa Nature Center's plug. We are really passionate about native plants, and so if you're interested in purchasing a native plants for your garden, every year the Chippewa Nature Center has a native plant sale. And we sell vegetables and fruits and also flowers. And so flowers and trees and all sorts of saplings and starters. And I don't know if we sell seeds exactly, but they're native to the area, and so they're really good for the animals and the other plants that are interacting in the space, and they're good for the area because they were native. You know that they're probably going to grow. They're going to be okay with the amount of heat, the amount of cold, the amount of rain that we get, because they're used to being in this area. There's also tons of information about what types of plants are native to Michigan. You can find it online, but if you don't go out and buy them straight away, you can also just research and see which varieties or things you might be interested in and implementing them in your own home garden space. If you're looking for a community that isn't Creative 360 or Master Gardeners or a community that you found in Midland, there's also the Michigan Farmers Market Association. They'd be able to answer your questions, and also you'd be able to interact with other growers and say like, hey, what has really been working for you? When did you plant this certain variety of tomatoes? Or what have you found to be the best lettuce for X, Y, Z? And so there's an example of a community organization that you can connect with. They're down in East Lansing. And I had to put this in because I thought it was fun. This is a design for a bird garden, which is one of the gardens I mentioned in the beginning. But there are some really in-depth like how-tos to actually build and construct your spaces. And so there's also resources like this available for fruits and vegetable gardens as well. But if you want to expand, you can find information about how to grow a food forest in Norway, which is also pretty cool. So keep your eye out. Don't close yourself into a little box. Be creative and excited because this is a really beautiful process of growing your own food. So those are some of the resources. And last but not least, my advice. My advice for beginner gardeners is to start small and be patient. I mentioned it earlier, but if you take on a big project and you don't have a lot of help, and when things start getting crazy in like July and August and September, it might be discouraging. And so start small, find some things that you're interested in, try them out, try some nice dishes in the kitchen, maybe that you haven't made before with your homegrown vegetables. It can be really encouraging and exciting. Be patient. Some things won't work out. You'll plant something, you'll get really emotionally attached to it because you've watched it go from seed to sprout, you've hardened it, you've planted it, and then it doesn't grow. And that's okay. Just be patient because a lot of things will grow, and so next year you can try again. Plan before you plant. I highly recommend a garden journal. Garden journals can be a really important tool. You can set up a calendar in your garden journal. You can write what you did on the exact day of the exact year. You can write what worked, what didn't work, when you had to water. Maybe you thought you put your garden in the most perfect spot in your yard, and then hindsight, you actually look back and you're like, well, it would have been sunnier in this spot. And so that's all information that you can keep in your garden journal. What varieties work best for you? What varieties did your family like to eat most? What seeds you have stored? How long they have been stored? All of this information can go into a garden journal. Grow what you like, because you're going to be eating it and working with it and caring for it. So grow things that you're familiar with and that you plan to eat. Things that you go and buy at the grocery store regularly. Compost, you can start now. Get a bin, put it in your fridge, put it in your freezer. Find a plan, go online, do some research, find a composting structure that works best for you. And you can start now. And it will be really beneficial when it's time to actually plant your garden, to have compost on the ready and be able to implement it in as soon as possible. Mulch can block weeds and keep in moisture. There's plastic mulch and natural mulch. Plastic mulch can raise the temperature of your garden just a little bit, but that can help extend growing periods. You can also put a little tent over a certain row if you want to extend your growing periods even more. But there's beneficial and there's pros and cons for different types of mulches. But mulch can be a really important tool to use in your garden. You can also compost. You can use your compost as mulch as well. Be in your garden. Be happy to be there. You'll notice what weeds need picking. The moisture levels, you can check your plants. If you're using a terrace, maybe you go walk by your grapes or your peas and you're realizing that they're kind of curling off into the middle of nowhere. You can walk by your garden, really interact with it and help, bring some of those stragglers back in. And you can also plan ahead for your kitchen. So if you're walking through and you're like, oh my gosh, my tomatoes will be ready in 2 days, what do I want to make? That's a really great way to, get people excited and get yourself excited about what's coming up. And not only should you try things that you're familiar with, but try something adventurous. Maybe you want to plant some purple pumpkins, or some white pumpkins, or some purple tomatoes, or some yellow tomatoes, or purple potatoes, or whatever you'd like. A cucamelon. Try something fun just to watch how it grows, see what other insects are interacting with it, and yeah, try something new. And with that, happy gardening, my friends. If you have any questions, comments, I'm really hoping for a discussion. And so if you have a question, I'd be more than happy to take them, but also open it up because I might not be able to answer all the questions. So if somebody else has experience or an answer to somebody else's question, I'd like this to be a community activity. I wish we could all sit in a circle, but for now, let's just keep our ears open and our minds awake. And does anybody have anything they'd like to bring to the table?
I have a question about you composting with the bin in your refrigerator.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? You just leave it there?
Well, I am from a certain situation where I get to take it from my apartment building, and then I drive to the farm that I grew up on, and I'm able to dispose of it in that way. And so that's an example of something that works for me. I don't have a lot of space to have a big bin that's rotating. I'm not going to be at my apartment for very long, and so I don't want to put an infrastructure in or put any infrastructure in. And so for my example, I just take my bin. It's been really nice that it's winter, so I can put it outside if it starts smelling, and then it freezes, and then I just dispose of it on our farm in the most safe and practical way for us.
That's my question. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
It's not, if it's in the refrigerator, it's not going to decompose as much as it would have,
Right.
And you just bury it then, or?
Well, my grandfather has a large garden, and he composts all of his materials that he takes out of the garden at the end of the year. And so I helped him clean out his garden, and I know where that spot is. And so now when I need to take my compost out, I bring it to the exact spot that his compost was dumped just a few months ago. So it'll be all kind of in the same area, same kind of timeline, and it's the most effective thing for my personal situation. But great question.
Well, I've actually tried taking my stuff that's not being in the refrigerator, even in the summertime, because I don't have a bin that I compost in, and keeping the shovel in the garden, and between rows I dig and dump it and cover it and move the shovel.
Yeah.
But I don't notice that that's really
Well,
effective.
Yeah, I've worked at some camps where they have large cafeterias of food from hundreds of campers, and so they bring their stuff out, and they have the chicken wire kind of thing with the lid. You have to have the lid or the animals will get in, but that's what they use. Does anybody else in this room have any experience with composting in an easy, effective way?
Just dig a hole.
Just dig a hole?
Dig a hole, and then in the winter, cover it, and then go out, throw it in, cover it back up. It's going to sit there frozen for most of, they'll come in March, things start thawing, and then by winter, by spring, you build up the hole, and then just fill, soil on top of it, and dig a new hole next fall.
And then you can just turn the hole, or you just leave it?
Well, I'm not making, I guess I'm fertilizing the garden, just getting rid of my compost through the winter, right? All my kitchen scraps and stuff, instead of sending them into the trash. I just throw them in a hole and
What do you
somewhere
cover
in the
your hole
garden,
with?
within the landscape bed.
What do you cover the hole with?
Plywood.
Oh.
Just did something I
Hard
can lift
cover,
up, yeah,
stuff on
something,
it, yeah.
whatever I've got around. And it sits there, frozen, but
It's a good idea.
cover it up and then throw mulch. A lot of times it's in a landscape bed. It's in the landscape bed.
Well, I could actually do it in my garden.
Or in the
Have a
garden.
hole, it's not that far. I'm gonna have to walk out.
How long does it take for composting to decompose enough to use it in a garden? Or you just put...
It really depends on where you are, what you're putting in
Right.
it, when you're putting in it. But as long as it's like turning back into soil and that slow process, you've got lots of worms and stuff. It could be 1 season, 2 seasons, a couple seasons. It also depends if you're putting manure in it. You want to be super careful to make sure that that manure is breaking down properly, so you're not going to get sick. But yeah, I would say 1 or 2
Like I'm
seasons.
picturing a banana peel would take a while, right?
Mhm.
But, okay, you just keep turning it.
Yeah, if they're bigger, tougher items like banana peels or corn cobs or something, you really want to cut them up small before you throw them into the compost, and then they'll break down
Okay.
faster.
It's kind of fun when you go into the garden and you're digging around and then you're like, I found a piece of a corn cob that wasn't quite decomposed. That's happened to me. I'm like, there's a banana peel. What used to be a banana peel. It's not slimy anymore, though.
There's also some in-house methods that are pretty cool. So there's bokashi method, which uses worms. So you keep a big tub of worms, and they'll eat pretty much everything you've got in the kitchen. You can turn it. You make compost tea. That's another one. That's another little bin you keep, and it's all anaerobic, so it just breaks down, and then you drain the tea off. So you have liquid fertilizers. You can fertilize house plants or in your garden too. That's a nice. It's not stinky like some people think either. In the house, it's all contained.
Okay. The community garden out here does all coffee grounds. We actually get it from a couple of local coffee places, and so that's what's back there.
Oh,
So it doesn't smell at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Does anybody on Zoom or Facebook Live have any questions? All right. Well, I will make sure that the resources and the presentation notes that I used during this presentation are available for people that weren't here. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. If you're interested, grab some books in the back, take them home. They've all been sanitized, as well as the clipboards that you're using, so you don't have to be too worried about bringing parts of me home with you. So it's okay. The clipboards, yes. The paper and the calendar, please take with you. You can leave the clipboards and the colored pencils just on the table. I'll make sure to wash everything before I bring it back. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this. This is an at-home soil test that I did. As you can see, I filled some soil up about halfway in this very large jar and added some water, and then I shook it. And I shook it a whole bunch, and I tipped it upside down, and the sand sunk to the bottom because it has the largest particles. And then there's like a dark kind of area here that would be considered like topsoil, which is not very thick, so if I was planting anything in this space, I'd probably want to add some more organic matter. And then at the very top is just some like leaves and sticks that floated around. But this is a good way, if you're really not sure what's in your garden, to kind of, hello, here's my jar. The colors are able to tell you what you really have. So if you've got a lot of sand, take a mental note and say, okay, I'm going to have to add a lot of water and maybe some vermiculite and some other things to really help the water stay in your space. But at-home soil test. It doesn't tell you the pH or the fancy stuff. Oh, okay. No, that's fine. But it will tell you if you have sand, silt, or clay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. Happy gardening. Gardening 101.